A moment after placing Liana's petal among his notes, Seaman turned back to the Transcendent Network. Apologizing sincerely to the transcendent beings, he introduced himself respectfully as Lee Seaman, the unemployed bum, promising to share his intense thoughts and insight with them. Days passed, and watching the Transcendent Network became a part of his daily routine. One day, Seaman noticed Kion, the Black Lion, online and greeted him, noting it had been a while since Kion had posted a photo. Kion, born the son of a noble family slave, had risen to fame as a mercenary with stolen swordsmanship after avenging his mother's death by his master. From that day on, Kion eliminated all noble bloodlines and emerged as the continent's strongest warrior. Seaman looked over a family photo Kion had shared from a recent trip and noted how much Kion's son resembled his parents. Shortly after, the sword demon Perzan, the continent's top swordmaster, greeted him. Seaman replied to Perzan, who playfully remarked on his quick response. Perzan shared that he'd developed feelings for someone and asked Seaman for advice on winning her heart. Amused, Seaman asked if Perzan had been feeling lonely lately. He suggested that Perzan try a heartfelt approach, starting with a compliment as simple as asking where she'd hidden her wings, implying she was an angel. Perzan, intrigued, asked about the wings, and Seaman explained it was a sophisticated play on words to imply admiration. Perzan was impressed, and Seaman added that if she responded with a smile, he could express that her smile made his heart feel as if it might explode. Enthusiastically, Seaman continued offering Perzan more tips on winning her over. Afterward, Perzan thanked him, promising that if his advice worked, he would save up points to visit him in person. Pleased, Seaman agreed, though the promise made him realize something important. Through his interactions with the transcendent beings, he had come to notice a distinct trait among them of their unwavering commitment. They never procrastinated, they always kept their promises, and they never backed down from challenges. In contrast, Seaman saw his own reality as one marked by hesitation and laziness. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered to himself, finally admitting that someone like him could probably never become a raider. Turning to the fridge, he grabbed a bottle of alcohol and drank deeply, then collapsed onto his messy sofa, his eyes filled with tears. Reflecting on his dashed hopes, he lamented that if things were going to end up this way, he never should have been given the hope of becoming a raider. Seaman had envisioned nothing else for himself, and he still yearned to become a true raider, to prove he hadn't been wrong about his dreams. But with his aura level fixed at 103 in 6 long years gone by, he could barely even pull himself out of bed. Seaman began typing on his laptop, composing a heartfelt post for the Transcendence Network, struggling over how to phrase his final sentence. With pain weighing on his heart, he took another drink and submitted his long post to the forum. Soon after, he lost consciousness from the alcohol. Hours later, a notification sound from his laptop stirred him awake. Groggily, he assumed he'd merely fallen asleep, but a sudden horror gripped him as he wondered if he might have written something strange in his drunken state. Rushing to open the site, he was surprised to find supportive comments from the Transcendent members. Lord Commander Jareth urged him to keep moving forward no matter what. Dragon Lord Lee Monkaiser reminded him that life was short and that even he had once faced similar challenges. Perzan encouraged him, promising to visit and have a drink together once he saved enough points, while Shadow King Demogling advised him that true strength could only come from taking that first step. Moved by their unexpected encouragement, Seaman thanked them all, unaware that a gate had opened behind him. Just then, a rough, iron-like voice addressed him, calling him the unemployed bum Lee Seaman. Terrified, he froze, not daring to turn around, guessing from the voice that it had to be one of the transcendent beings. Before he could react, he felt a hand on his back, and a powerful energy surged through him as the mysterious figure behind him spoke, acknowledging the struggles within him. His powerlessness, depression, weak resolve, and even a cursed constitution that slowly wore down both his mind and body. Pain shot through Seaman as he felt a sensation like snakes crawling over his skin, and he cried out. The figure revealed that his ailment was known as severed veins. As the transcendent being read deeper into Seaman's memories, he came across one where Sungjin had scornfully told him not to show off. This memory made the transcendent pause in surprise. Seaman managed to turn slightly, and the figure noticed the determined grip of his hand, prompting him to ask if he truly hadn't given up yet. Withdrawing his hand, the mysterious man then transported Seaman to another place. As Seaman looked around in confusion, the man introduced himself as Doko Chinmay, the greatest martial artist in history. He commanded Seaman to declare that he was no coward. Seaman felt an overwhelming power radiating from Chinmay, a strength so intense it seemed capable of making the world itself bow. While he had previously been in awe of Grand Wizard Liana's power, Chinmay was truly on another level. Chinmay instructed him to gather points and access the tips board, mentioning he had left something there specifically for him. Just as Chinmay turned to leave, Seaman tried to stop him, shouting for him to wait. But in an instant, he was back in his room, hitting the floor with a thud. Quickly getting to his feet, he wondered if the encounter had been a dream, but a lingering sting on his arm confirmed it had been real. Remembering Chinmay's words about courage, Seaman's body trembled, but he felt an unexpected lightness and decided it might finally be time to clean his room. Hours later, the room was spotless. The kitchen was organized, the trash was bagged, and every corner was bright and clutter-free. Satisfied with his work, he looked at his hands and thought that now, the only trash left in the room was him. Taking a moment, he looked at Liana's pedal, reminding himself of the meeting and the words he'd been told. Zipping up his jacket, he hesitated by the door, but then gathered the courage to step outside, repeating to himself that wasn't a coward. A short while later, he found himself ravenously eating fried chicken after running for 10 minutes, surprised by his hunger. However, seeing the food he'd already devoured, he realized it wasn't enough and decided to go for another run. As he paused to catch his breath, he acknowledged that his goals felt overwhelming to tackle alone. Then, he noticed a gym nearby and decided to check it out. Entering the gym, he excused himself, only to be stunned at the sight of an older man with a massive build lifting an enormous barbell. Seaman was still dazed by the impressive sight when another man approached, asking if he was new in here to work out. The older man introduced himself as Coach Kim Deokbi, and Seaman introduced himself in return. Deokbi immediately noted, with some amusement, that he could smell chicken on Seaman, leaving him confused. Deokbi then asked if he'd just eaten, admonishing him for thinking he could start working out right after a cheap meal. Seaman stammered an apology, but Dickby grabbed his shoulder, urging him to start warming up, and told him that since he had come all this way, he should begin right away. Seaman, intimidated, quickly agreed. As they began, Dokby noticed something and touched Seaman's arm, remarking that he seemed to have done some exercise before. Seaman admitted he'd done a little in the past, to which Deokbi enthusiastically slapped his back, encouraging him that he had a solid foundation and that they would work together to get him back in shape. Soon after, Seaman found himself on the treadmill, running as if his life depended on it, completely exhausted. Dokby asked if he was tired, and Seaman stammered that he just needed a brief rest. Dokby shouted back that if he felt like collapsing, he should go ahead and collapse. If he was meant to get back up, he would. He reminded Seaman that overthinking would hold him back from real change. Though too worn out to reply, Seaman pushed himself harder, realizing that his real obstacle wasn't a lack of aura, but rather a lack of confidence. Seeing this spark of determination, Deekby yelled for him to keep going, even if it killed him. Seaman, with renewed grit, responded affirmatively. Hours later, aching and trembling, Seaman muttered that he was truly at his limit. But the old man from earlier approached him with a thumbs up, commending him for his effort and saying he'd see him again tomorrow. Appreciating the compliment, Seaman thanked him and felt a long-missed sense of accomplishment. Later, back in his apartment, Seaman logged into the Transcendent Network, feeling he'd made real progress that day, remembering Chinma's instruction to check the tips board. He clicked on the notice board but received a message that his access was denied due to insufficient points. Puzzled, he wondered how he could earn points, and the system displayed his current member quest to bring his weight down below 100 kilograms. Shocked, he exclaimed in disbelief, questioning how he was supposed to achieve such a goal. The next day, Seaman was back at the gym, running on the treadmill with a determined mindset to get his weight below 100 kilograms. His coach, noticing his dedication, shouted encouragement, telling him not to stop, even if it killed him. Seaman pushed himself to the limit, reaching 8.4 kilometers and shouting to fuel his motivation. A few days later, Seaman stood in his bathroom, examining his reflection and wondering if he'd managed to shed a little weight. Convincing himself to give his best that day, he headed outside and began running toward the gym, mentally preparing for some light cardio and interval training. As he ran, a woman passing in the opposite direction noticed him. At first, when she saw him, she thought a wild boar was charging toward her, but then realized he looked noticeably slimmer. Later, while doing pull-ups, Seaman chanted to himself that strength only came from starting and reminded himself repeatedly, with gritted teeth, that he was not a coward. Even though his muscles ached with pain, he continued pushing himself. The woman, now nearby with her water bottle, observed his effort and approached as he took a break to drink. She commented on how hard he was working, mentioning that she'd noticed his frequent visits and found his dedication rare. Seaman, still catching his breath, simply acknowledged her comment and mentioned he'd heading out, leaving her taken aback and irritated that he'd leave right after she'd gone out of her way to talk to him. Resuming his run, Seaman caught a faint scent of a raider in the air, likely lingering from the woman. Based on her scent, he guessed she'd at least surpassed the blue mark. Raiders possessed physical and athletic abilities far beyond those of ordinary humans, and even blue mark raiders, the lowest grade, held significant power over regular people. Seaman reflected on his trainee days, recalling the unbridgeable divide between raiders and ordinary humans, and even among raiders themselves, a hierarchy that felt like an insurmountable wall. Suddenly, the woman turned in his direction and sprinted toward him, easily catching up before darting past him. She turned, teasingly called him fat uncle, and waved as she ran off, taunting him that no matter how hard he worked, it wouldn't make much of a difference. Her comment left him frustrated. That evening, back in his apartment, Seaman went straight to his laptop. Curious about the day's posts on the Transcendent Network, he spotted a post from Liana and thought back to how intimidating she had initially seemed, only to find that she had a surprisingly kind side. Shaking his head, he reminded himself that Liana was far beyond his reach and turned his attention to his quest. Clicking the quest to check his weight, he closed his eyes and silently hoped he'd reached his goal, but the scale displayed 100.02 kilograms just over the mark. Frustrated, he sprang to his feet and rushed to the bathroom, wondering if he could shed that tiny bit extra to finally break 100 kilograms. After emptying his system completely, Seaman weighed himself again, only to see the scale reading 100.0005 kilograms. Frustrated, he shouted in exasperation, calling it petty and maddening. Determined, he sniffed and coughed to rid his body of every last drop of water. Finally, the notification confirmed he'd reached 99.9 kilograms. As a reward for completing his quest, he received 100 points on the Transcendent Network. He saw that the tips board required members to be level 2 or higher, which could be unlocked with exactly 100 points. Excitedly, he upgraded his level and clicked on the tips board, amazed at the wealth of advice shared by various members. The system explained that reading a post on the tips board would cost 100 points, while posting cost 200 points, but he could earn 10 points for each view his post received. Shocked by the intricate setup, he marveled at the possibilities. Browsing, he noticed a post titled, "Learn to Grow the World Tree with Liana," which caught his attention. Then the system notified him that as a first-time visitor to the tips board, he could read one post for free. Thrilled, he selected the post titled, "Void Severance" from the legendary martial artist, Heavenly Demon Doko Chinmin. The post described Void Severance, the ultimate path of void manipulation. It explained that Kai originates in the lower Dantian and must circulate through the body to complete one full cycle. However, individuals with disrupted meridians couldn't sustain this cycle as their inner energy dissipated like smoke. Reading this, Seaman was astonished, realizing this was precisely his condition. As he continued, his eyes teared up. Chinmin's post revealed that with the correct cultivation method, one could restore inner energy flow and escape this weakened state. Chinmin had imparted this transcendent skill to him, encouraging him to revere it and to follow the prescribed incantation. Seaman obeyed, reciting the words to invoke the Taijutsu flow, the name of this divine skill. Afterward, he sat quietly, reflecting. Until now, he had viewed aura as something to dominate and control. But Chinmin treated aura as if it possessed a will of its own, a living essence to be understood and guided, a revelation that felt like the answer he'd been searching for all along. That's all for today, guys. See you on the next upload.